Cowboy Bebop cancelled after 1 season by Netflix. Ouch. I don't think this is necessarily a surprise to anyone after hearing its incredibly brutal reception online, but it is a pretty big kick in the balls, because next on the chopping block is of course One Piece. The series that I love, I think, more than anything else in this world. Don't tell my wife that. In regards to Cowboy Bebop though, I didn't mind it. I really don't understand why it was dragged through the mud quite that much, because sure, it has its problems, as I do speaking, because sure, it had its problems, like a lot of problems, but overall it was fun. It was nothing life-changing, but not everything needs to be. And according to an article on Kotaku, the series, which was somewhat anticipated prior to release, at least based on what little we had to go on it, reportedly had decent viewership figures of 74 million hours worldwide during its first week. But those numbers went through the floor in the week after, dropping to 59%. THR say that Netflix looked at those numbers, looked at the cost of the show, and decided to pull the plug. While its cancellation will break a few hearts, it must be frustrating for fans to see once again a beloved anime given adaptation treatment by a major Western studio or platform, only for that new take to fall flat and disappoint fans. And I think that's just the problem with live action anime. It's always a no-win situation. If you try to create a quote faithful adaptation of the series, it will never ever live up to the original. Never. And arguably you shouldn't be doing that anyway, because live action is a completely different medium and you want to be taking advantage of what it does better than animation, rather than trying to replicate animation in a non-animaty way. But if you do that and you change the source material too much, then problems again. Because then that's destined for failure, because people don't like you changing the things that they already love. I have to say though, honestly, even with all of the problems, Cowboy Bebop is the closest that the Western world has come to a solid live action adaptation. And don't take that as you will, but it's true. It craps all over every other anime adaptation I've seen attempted, but that's still not quite good enough, especially in this day and age. With so much competition on Netflix alone, much less the rest of the internet, I think that a show or a movie or any piece of media needs to be practically life-changingly good to warrant watching it. We're always looking for the next Squid Game or the next Arcane or just the next societal phenomenon, and if you fall even slightly flat of that, then it is a done deal. Not in your favor. A bad deal. And there were exactly 3 things that I hated about the Cowboy Bebop adaptation. One was vicious. Why? It was a very cool idea to expand on the Syndicate and give them some more oomph as antagonists, but vicious was comically bad in a series where I genuinely praise how cartoony they made it. I mostly enjoyed that vibrant world, the cinematography, and bringing a lot of these larger-than-life characters into being, but vicious was just too much. Another thing I really disliked was moments here and there of writing. I mean, I don't mind that a lot of the jokes gave Cowboy Bebop this sort of sitcom-y vibe. That's fine with me. What I didn't like as much were the huge plot conveniences. Like there's one episode where Faye gets injured after confronting eco-terrorists, and in the very next scene she just so happens to run into Spike and Jet at a diner, just a random diner. And the convenience of that situation was just a little bit too much for me, because she just so happens to stumble upon them in this exact diner, in this exact city, on that exact moon, in this exact solar system. Like they could have been literally anywhere else, and it was just a bit much for me. Whereas I remember in the actual episode, both of those parties were actually somewhat involved with the terrorists, so their meeting up was much more natural. And the third thing that I really disliked was the Mad Pierrot episode. I think it was episode 8, which is a big shame, because that's where all of the good stuff should theoretically be happening. Spike embarks on a mission to fight an invincible assassin, and this is also the climax of the vicious story, slaughtering all of the Syndicate peeps. And it was just awful. That episode in particular was terrible. Like, I praised the cinematography of the series before, but the fight against Mad Pierrot was probably one of the worst I've seen on screen from a major production. And I mean, look, if you are not part of a major Hollywood movie, then just don't even consider wire fighting. It is so difficult to do well. And what we ended up here was a sad floating clown. What I will say is that everything else I quite enjoyed. Spike, Jet, and Faye were a fun cast to hang out with, and yeah, sure, their jokes didn't always land, but I liked their energy. Especially John Cho. I think he did a phenomenal job. And with Jet, I was a bit taken aback by the idea of just how much I enjoyed giving giving him a daughter and having his arc be all about becoming a good father and like fatherly stuff. It was really sweet and it gave the series a ton of heart, but Kotaku continues. Despite the enthusiasm and clear love for the source material from both the cast and the crew, the animation fundamentally failed to understand what makes anime, and Cowboy Bebop in particular, so special in its original format, leading to a live-action series that underwhelmed in almost every area except for its soundtrack and Cho's starring performance. And that's a good point, the soundtrack was fantastic. Bringing Yoko Kanno back to score the show was easily the best thing that the series did, and it was a major part in setting the atmosphere of the world. So overall, yeah, I quite liked the show, but the entire time I was watching it, I have to admit I was always asking, why? Why do we need this? Who is this made for? Who is actually asking for this? And the answer is, we didn't. It wasn't made for anyone in particular, and nobody. The reason why this series was made is because I think it was seen as a safer bet than investing money into an original production. In fact, there was one particular review that stated this perfectly by saying, "This new show is the product of a culture that exhumes yesterday because it's run out of fresh ideas for tomorrow." And that pretty perfectly encapsulates it. Although with Cowboy Bebop, there may have been a point in doing it. You know, the series is quite old now, and maybe a revival of sorts would have been good to inspire a new generation of fans to watch it. So it's definitely not entirely without purpose, but it's still pretty severely lacking. When I was working in theater, the paramount question was always, why are we doing this show? What are we trying to say, and what are we trying to accomplish? And maybe that's just the wanky aspect of theater, but the shows with a clear vision almost always destroyed those who were just doing it for the sake of doing something. We needed to do something. And this is also somewhat addressed in the Kotaku article, which writes, Andre Nemec's adaptation doesn't trust the audience, nor does it trust itself. It plasters over that lack of confidence with a sense of cartoonish detachment in the sets and the performances that practically say, we're not taking any of this seriously, so you don't have to either. And I kind of get that. When things are a bit too jokey, it can make the serious stuff harder to land, but I don't fully agree with that statement. There is a fine balance you can hit, and for the most part, the series did pretty well, just not with Vicious. Oh, and also not with Ed, but look, the less said about Ed, the better. And in the end, Cowboy Bebop, as much as I actually liked it, it has no point. The reason why it was made was just pure risk mitigation. It was too much of a coin flip to invest in a new IP, so let's take something with an existing good reputation and milk it like a delicious live-action cow. And obviously this leaves me pretty incredibly worried for One Piece because it's being produced by the same group. Tomorrow Studios making Cowboy Bebop was meant to be their proof of concept. If it was a hit, then yes, full steam ahead right into Pirate Land, but now One Piece, the significantly bigger project, is the one that has to be that proof of concept as well as a certified global mega hit. Because, let's just be honest, just being good is not good enough. Live action One Piece has the truly unenviable task of needing to completely blow us away. If all we get from it is a competent story with likable characters and a decent world, then it will unfortunately fail. Because the stakes are so much higher. Cowboy Bebop, yeah, sure, it was a beloved classic anime series, but One Piece is the 20th highest grossing franchise of human history. The expectations are through the roof beyond the clouds and standing somewhere on the moon alongside NL and his various space cyborgs. Back to Bebop though, I do feel bad for it because, look, as I said, I had a pretty decent time with it. There was bad with the good, but it did not deserve anywhere near the outrage it generated online. And I honestly believe that a lot of that came from people who just thrive on negativity. You know, the ones who are just looking for the next not amazing property to rip to shreds and consume for clicks. Just sort of pretending that it's the worst thing to have ever been released, when in reality, you know, it's just kind of meh. Cowboy Bebop is not the worst thing that has ever been released, nowhere near it. Granted, it has a bit of a specific taste though, it's not going to be for everyone. It's not the series that makes you sit up and go, holy crap, I love this is the best. But still, the guys who made it, they gave it a pretty decent shot. With that said, I think I would really like it if we just stopped. Leave anime as anime and just focus on making something that natively suits the live action format.